Welcome to That Japanese Thing. Today we're going to be talking about the Ghibli movie Kaguya Hime. And before that, we're going to be talking about some Japanese news. My name is Chris. Today with me is Dylan and Yesh. Welcome, guys.
Hi.
Hey. And I will start us off with some news. Japan has announced a Economic Protection Act, which is specifically designed to counteract Chinese influence in wake of what Russia is doing to Ukraine. I think is really what's coming through here. So I'm sure everyone's aware that the US has signed some restrictions in regards to the Chinese economy into law, which are specifically in regard to the microprocessor, the chip manufacturing sector in China.
Mm-hmm.
I think I didn't really think the Americans would do this, but they've restricted sales of computer chips into China, and that's a kind of a crazy radical thing to do that I didn't really think would happen. But I guess people are really riled up about the current state of things. And so Japan is considering its own options, and Japan used to be the world's largest manufacturer of silicon chips back in the 80s. And they're still very vital in like the lower end of chip design. So they supply substrates and really sort of difficult to produce materials that, then are sort of shipped to Taiwan, and Taiwan actually finishes manufacturing the silicon. Some of it ends up in Korea and America and various other places as well. But they don't really do much in the way of consumer customer end silicon anymore. So part of this is to try and revitalize some of that stuff, but it's really not. It's not like what America has done, and just poured a huge amount of money into making fabs in the States. I think is it Arizona or is it Texas? It's some Arizona, yeah. I mean, so America is really going hardcore with that. Japan, I think, probably doesn't actually have the money to do that at the moment, just given like their debt situation compared to the States. But what they're doing is they're focusing on Japanese areas that would make them somewhat autonomous, so they didn't have to rely on the Chinese supply chain as much for components. There doesn't seem to be much coordination necessarily between the US, Japan, and other players in this market right now, but it does seem like it's part of a strategy just to cut back on reliance on Chinese manufacturing in the region. There were 7 industries mentioned. I'm just mentioning the chip one as that's really like the major one, but battery design, farming was also one.
Yeah.
And a few other things, but yeah, those are the major ones for that. What do you guys think? Good idea, bad idea?
Have you heard about why they have put that limitation in?
What limitation?
The limitation about... Oh, sorry, I didn't explain, I suppose. So the reason for the specific chip sales into China stuff thing happening...
Oh, the Americans? No, I don't really know.
So there were 2 instances that set the bee's nest on fire, per se. Americans gave the newest chip technology to China, effectively, because they wanted to produce it over there, and they don't have effectively copyright law.
Are you talking about what AMD did, right?
Partially what AMD did, but also the reason why the US determined that pulling out of China totally wouldn't make a difference to the Chinese ability to produce new chips is because the Chinese took the technology that was given to them effectively by Intel and AMD,
Yes.
and they just copied it.
Yeah.
So even if Intel and AMD pull out now, everything that they have researched is already spread across the industries there. So the US put in a limitation on this chip sales things, not because they're like, now you won't have chips, ha ha ha. because these guys can make the chips.
Sort of.
But
Not really, but sort of,
specifically,
yeah.
Well, I mean, even if it's not up to the latest standard,
I mean,
can take
they could
their
make
fab-
like a 45 nanometer version of the latest chip.
No,
Wouldn't be great.
They have the ability to make 8 in less than 3 years or 4 years. That's what's causing the issue. When they tried to pull out, it was
sort of, yeah.
discovered that they're trying to clone the 8. And I know that 8 is behind now. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
But just advancing from effectively having nothing to 8 is
Yeah.
already a gargantuan steal. And the second thing they did was they took a US battery technology. They copyrighted it. They put it on international copyright. And now the US company that made it can no longer research it.
Yes, yeah.
They denied the US company that made the product the right to research the product.
It's almost like a trade war is happening.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's
I mean,
insane, personally.
If
but
if no one knows what we're talking about, there is a wonderful channel called Asianometry that deals with the chip manufacturing industry, specifically in China, Taiwan, Japan, so on and so forth. I mean, he does other things, but mostly it's related to those sort of things. There's a rogue Taiwanese man who is currently in China heading all of these products. He's one of those driven people who doesn't really mind whose toes he steps on, so long as he
Yeah.
can.
But the government is also giving him a lot of muscle of backup because he's advancing the technology of the country by decades.
Yes, I mean he is the reason Samsung is as advanced as it is, and now he's gone to a Chinese firm who's doing similar things.
So
But
the US
that
now-
being said, I mean, without Taiwan and the US, allowing further developments to happen, they could make copies of chips and they could make them on okay-ish wafers, but they don't really have the ability to compete one to
Well, the
one.
problem is, currently, those wafers are made in Korea, Japan, and other places, not the United States.
Mostly Japan, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So China can just import it from there and then use the tech that they've literally lifted to advance.
Yeah.
Secondly, it has been discovered that they can produce 8 nanometer, not on large scale, not in like a gargantuan scale,
Yeah.
but they can produce it. And if they put some money
But
into
yep,
expand
they can
that,
produce it, but with Dutch and Japanese machines. So
doesn't
that
matter.
well, I mean,
The
it really
problem
does.
is-
I mean, there's no other place in the world that makes those things, and I mean, as advanced as Chinese manufacturing hub is, it can't really duplicate them.
Well, to a certain extent, that's only true to a certain extent. The problem is a lot of those machines currently exist in Taiwan.
Well, yes, but Taiwan is not China, right?
Well,
No,
as
no,
of-
no, very
what's the
much.
date today? What's the dates today?
No.
As of right now, you are correct.
Look, if China does decide to invade Taiwan, things would change.
They've already made steps.
Well, okay, and look, I'm not going to argue about that right now. Maybe that's a topic for a different podcast, really.
Indeed, indeed. But anyways, long story short, the U.S. is now highly offended that effectively the tech advances that they have
Yeah,
are effectively now cut off from them.
indeed.
And these short-term, incredible profit gain things don't really work in international politics, because countries can afford to allow you to make a bunch of money as long as they get the advancement.
Indeed. So, I mean, the
And so US is
the
now
issue
making
is,
steps to cut that off.
but the issue is not really the US here. It's Japan trying to be compliant with the Japan has sort of taken the side of the US, so it has to now accommodate those desires in a way that's still workable for the Japanese economy. I don't really think it's necessarily entirely in Japan's self-interest to implement any of these things. They would probably benefit from being able to trade freely with both the US and China, as to their heart's desire, really. But it has to choose a side, and I think China is the scarier side, so it's gone with the US.
Well, I mean, China's also the side that has deployed ships of a military nature.
I mean,
into
yes,
Japan
indeed.
waters.
I mean, it's yeah, it's the less,
And
it's
then when
the least
can you
stable
define
option
what
for
those
Japan.
waters mean to you exactly?
Yeah.
Give
Right.
us a letter. Let us know.
Yeah. Look, I don't know about the chip specifically, but in terms of autonomy for critical I mean,
Resources, yeah. What do they
critical
call it?
resources, infrastructure, and services. You need to be able to, especially if you're going to expect tensions to rise.
Oh, one thing I didn't mention up front is, sorry, the name of the act is the ESPA Act.
Incredible.
Economic Protection something Act. Services, maybe?
Oh, boo.
But anyway, that's my bit of news for the week. What do you guys have?
Dylan,
All
would
right.
you like to go?
Sure. So I've got two pieces. One is that a human skeleton has, at least most of it, has been found outside Universal Studios in Osaka. Apparently, a staff member was busy trimming some of the foliage and came across a skull, part of the upper jaw, and some other bones.
Right.
Police got involved and they found what they believe to be the rest of the body, as well as trousers and a belt that is in the men's style. So it looks like there has been a cold case sitting for a very long time just outside Universal Studios. Or maybe it was like...
Or someone, a boy from a parallel world, was reincarnated as a Skull Knight, for example, outside. That's
maybe.
equally as plausible, I believe.
We should watch that morgue. Yeah.
So a cold case in Osaka.
Well, I mean, I would like it's technically not a cold case because it's a fresh case, but it's
it's long since this person was deceased.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
Long enough to become a skeleton, yeah.
Maybe those lines are just a bit too long.
Do you know?
I don't know.
There was some YouTubers poking fun at the way Japanese people speak rudely, and there was a program, talking about how Yakuza speak and the way it's portrayed in the media. And just in real life, Yakuza tend to speak quite politely. Or at least, not super rudely. It turns out the place with the rudest speaking population is the Osaka Police Department.
Oh, really?
They speak more like the criminals there that, people think they're arresting than the actual criminals do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Osaka's an interesting place, and I think it probably was quite kind of gang heavy in the 80s and before that. It had that sort of Blade Runner kind of aesthetic for a reason. So this could be there for a while.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
Yeah. So I don't know if you know this, but there's been a bit of a debacle with the production for Bayonetta 3.
No. What is the debacle?
Yeah. So the original voice actress, Helena Taylor, is no longer going to be on the project. They initially propositioned her, according to her, for the role, but she claims that she was offered about $4,000 for the role, which is not a lot of money for being the main protagonist's voice actor.
Also, especially in Bayonetta. Bayonetta is like one of the most popular video game franchises.
And there's a lot of dialogue, my word.
Quite long running and quite popular, so it's not a small title.
Yeah, no, it's... Yeah. That seems a very small amount of money for, that sort of production title. Yeah.
She's released this information against her NDA, but one of the claims she's making is that the industry is so tough to actually work in because of this kind of attitude, and that she hasn't got anything for them to really take if they sue her.
Right.
So, and she's aware that this is against her NDA.
What's the actress's name?
It's Helena Taylor.
Helena Taylor. Okay.
Mm.
And
so
you go on. Yeah. Sorry.
They've subsequently replaced her with let me just find her name again. I keep forgetting it. Jennifer Hale, who folks will recognize as the voice actress in Mass Effect for Commander Shepard, I believe.
Femshad, yeah.
She's very, very well known.
Right.
And you know, she's also had to sort of make statements post this, just basically claiming that she is under an NDA and she can't discuss anything, but she looks forward to working on the project, etc., etc. But yeah, I think this has fans up in arms, and it's interesting to see sort of the response or lack of response from the management at Platinum Games, who are the guys that are making this. They haven't really like responded to any requests for information or requests for contact.
Okay.
But yeah, so you know, I don't. It'll be interesting to see how this pans out, because I think there's quite a heavy fan base for Bayonetta. I feel like Bayonetta is either something that you really get into or feel fairly meh about.
Yes. That's probably true.
And I think one of the things the fan base is probably.
But regardless of what you think about that, I mean,
yeah,
it's probably making millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Sure.
And one of your main, this is the protagonist, yes?
The main
Yeah, the main protagonist, yeah.
I mean, they are probably going to be expecting this person to maybe do interviews and various things. And how can you remain positive about a company and a project when basically they're not even really paying you like a month's salary?
Yep.
Or, I mean, maybe it's a month's salary, but like, you know, if you have to do more than that amount of work, it doesn't sound great, and it's not worth a really good performance for something that demanding, in my opinion. Anyway.
100%, right?
Yeah. Well, hopefully something comes of it, but voice acting is notoriously not very well paying.
Yeah.
In fact, like in Japan, it's probably worse for a lot of voice actresses and actors, especially in the lower tiers. Anyway, moving on. Yeah, Yesh, do you have something?
Two very short stories, I think. I wanted to have something a little bit sillier after I heard that Dylan was going to do a story about a corpse being found outside of Universal.
Good.
So the first story I have is a guy accidentally reversed over the oldest toilet in Japan.
Also good, please.
Did he get shit canned?
He got shit canned, yes, actually, rather sadly.
Oh, shame.
But he is, the response that the police have said is that he was stunned by the extent of damage he had committed. The images from this are a little bit sad, because you can see that the building that he reversed into was an old style of building and maintained in an old style.
I see. 500-year-old. Wow.
Yeah. And he broke through the door, the wall, and the toilet all in one go. And there's just this like really, really terrible car sitting in the wreckage of a very old, well-maintained building.
What do you think the Brits are calling this? Probably
I have no idea.
Maybe it's a loo roll.
A bit of a loo roll. Oh, ouch.
Oh dear.
And finally, my last story that I think is a bit more of a positive. Japan is clearing up the Olympic village that it had set up during the Olympic Games that it had actually some time ago now, actually, rather sadly. But anyways, the whole Olympic Games thing ended up leaving a very sour taste in the mouth of many Japanese due to the lockdown and restrictions and everything, and the generalized feeling that people weren't worried about safety in the name of hosting the games.
Also, I mean, I don't think many people really paid attention to them, to be honest.
Well, I mean, a lot of things were happening in the world, including several wars.
Indeed.
So the games ended up getting quite overshadowed. And many Japanese actually felt put on by the game. Like they were asked to have a responsibility that they didn't want.
Yes.
Anyways, part of the process of setting up for the games was that they cleared out a bunch of space in Tokyo. Some of it was government land, but some of it was previously privately owned. They managed to obtain it in a legal manner, obviously, it looks like.
It must be... It must be said that this happens to Japan more often than any other country.
What?
The Olympic Games being cancelled. I think they are
Yes.
the only country that's ever happened to before, and it was due to a world war, obviously. So
Yes, yeah. But this is like almost a second occurrence.
almost the same thing, almost really. To the scale.
However, Japan is now going to use the opened empty space that is available in Tokyo, legendarily hard to get empty space in, to set up a hydrogen station and a hydrogen storage facility, which can be used to power the city, well, not the whole city, obviously, but provide power in case of emergency or should a requirement for it rise. Say, for example, your nuclear station is down for 22 years. So I think that's a really significant positive. Hydrogen stations are one of the cleanest ways to store and maintain energy.
Yeah.
It takes an awful lot of energy to make it work, but it looks like part of what they are doing is recycling the water from a nearby bay that apparently has hydrogen-rich water. And by doing this process, you end up with a somewhat more purified stuff passing on through. In a way, it's clearing up some of the water and it's providing a backup power source.
Yeah, I mean it's not the most efficient way to store power, but it's
certainly
a
not
long-term solution for sure.
But yeah, I mean, it does have a clean energy signature, and because it's nice that out of the situation that was the Olympics,
Right.
they managed to make a project that will improve lives in a fairly wide area around the project, actually.
I can sense that neither you or me have a particular fond view of the Olympics in general.
No, not this particular one, no.
No. All right. Anything else?
No, that's me.
Okay. Then on to the main topic. I coerced Yash and Dylan into watching the Ghibli film Kaguya Hime-sama.
The Tale of Princess Kaguya.
Yeah. Which is a 2013, I want to say, 2013 film.
Sure, let's go with that.
Made by Ghibli, and it's really quite beautiful.
Animation
And
style, I agree.
It feels like a water painting for most of the time. That's kind of the style they're going for, I think. And it has, yeah. Go
Sorry,
on.
it does feel like, you know, those very old Japanese paintings that you would see on walls and stuff. Sort of like from the 700s BC, not BC, sorry. Upper Christ.
They're actually not that old. So, do you know Hyakse?
Yeah,
Hyakse? His famous painting is the wave.
The way with
Yeah,
yep.
Yeah,
You're talking about ukiyo-e,
sure. Yeah,
the woodblock prints, right?
yeah.
Yes, yeah. I was saying that this, minus the woodblock, this looks like that painting style too.
But yeah, that's kind of. I mean, it's sort of. I can't remember what sort of time period does it depict. It might be like a Heian kind of.
Yeah, no. It's definitely Heian. Yeah, it's definitely Heian.
So it's yeah. Go on. Yeah.
I was gonna. So I mean, they're basing it off of the tales, which are the Monogatari is like one of the oldest.
Yeah.
I think it's the oldest Monogatari found, which is definitely set sort of in that Heian or pre-Heian period. As for the anime, it definitely looks like Heian because the attire is definitely older. Really looks older to me, at least.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean it's one of the older stories of Japanese folklore. Some people say from the 9th or 10th century, and there was sort of an interesting like literary tradition that was emerging in Japan at that time. It's mostly women who were writing in Japan because men were doing more official things, I would say, and noblemen's wives and such had a lot of free time. And access to like as much literature as they could consume. Technically speaking, women were not encouraged to be able to write. but this doesn't have seemed to have stopped like any of them from doing it. So they weren't allowed technically to publish anything writing in kanji. So Japanese women kind of co-opted a less formal version of Japanese called which has today become hiragana, which is the primary Japanese alphabet of today. But surprisingly, that's actually like a recent transition. Katakana used to be the primary intermediary form of writing for men, and the distinction happened when I don't know, sort of after the Meiji era, it kind of collapsed, and it turned out basically everyone had been using hiragana unofficially because it's so much easier to write than katakana, and it just looks so much better. That it was kind of co-opted into the main form of Japanese today. But anyway, from that area, we get the monogatari, as you say. Like monogatari just means story in Japanese. And Genji Monogatari is like the famous book that came out of that era, which a lot of people call the first modern, the first known novel in its sort of modern meaning of the word. So yeah, that's the era we're dealing with, and Kaguya-sama is really important to Japanese culture. If you don't know the story, I mean, at least just like maybe read the Wikipedia page, I guess, or watch this movie, and you'll see it pop up almost constantly in just about every medium. You'll hear it in songs, you'll see it in anime, you'll read it in manga, you'll see it in light novels and any like adaptation. So maybe Yesh, what is this movie about?
An overview would be that one day while working at bamboo cutting, an older man, finds a baby wrapped up. He takes it home, and the wife and him agree to raise it. As she grows, weirdly fast, she ends up being quite beautiful. The couple attempt to keep it quiet, but news of her beauty spreads, and she begins to get suitors, all of whom she turns away. Eventually, the quality of her suitors becomes so significant that it takes effort to make them go away, and she gives them, I think, what's supposed to be impossible quests to accomplish. And through all of this, she is gaining gifts from suitors and status when her family and her are improving in their quality of life. But it does look like she is enjoying herself less and less. As in the beginning, we see her, I think, do we directly see her stealing? But like we see her playing.
No.
We see her playing with her friends. And there's an implication that she's getting food and stuff. A little bit wink, wink, nudge, nudge, not quite correctly. But later on, she is like in wealthy places, surrounded by servants, etc., etc. And her happiness seems to be leeching away from her as more and more problems occur because of her beauty. Until the emperor, I want to say, falls in love with her.
Not the emperor per se, but
he's a leader figure. I didn't quite catch exactly what he was, but I thought he was very highly ranked. He was like a king figure, effectively. I'm saying emperor because I know Japan had an emperor, but I don't know it. I might not have caught on to exactly what he was. But long story short, he fell for her. She said no. And then it's revealed later on when her parents find her crying that she is from the moon and she was sent to Earth to get attachments as a form of punishment or something. And now the moon is calling for her to return. And she's very sad about this. The emperor and her family effectively try to fight this off, but it doesn't work in any way, shape, or form. The heavens come down. They look like they're all very happy, and they come to take her away. But as soon as they place it's not a haori, it's the shoulder shawl thing. I can't remember what it is. As soon as she returns to the heavens, she loses all emotion immediately, and you can kind of tell that by restoring her to her order, she has lost all connection with everyone around her, which
So
is incredibly depressing.
yeah,
And then she gets onto a chariot and rides off with
to the
a
heavenly
hint
palace of the moon. Yeah,
hint of a suggestion that she might have some regret, but this is the correct order. Order has been restored.
Peace out, plebs.
right. Oh dear. So what was
I'm sure
Hakama?
I've missed some story beats, but that's the
Kogama?
rough story.
It's
I feel like
it's
you
the thing
went
that
over
that
it, huh?
that Aqua has, right? That
Yes, yeah, the Hagamono.
yes, thank you. Yeah, it's just like a symbol of divinity, basically, in
Well, they
Japanese
put a
like
shawl on
imagery.
her, and a Hagamono floats up from her after that.
Indeed.
And the Hagamono is the returning of her to the celestial order, and she seems at peace, but she's lost all of the joy and sadness.
Fun fact: if anyone has that in a story, they are a god. Just bear that in mind if you're confused about something in an anime in the future. So yeah, the emperor does try to kidnap her, but she just sort of talks him out of it at some point. But there's a quest with 5 suitors, and they go do kind of impossible things for her. It's got that really odd kind of adventurous.
Feels like I'm reading the Odyssey, but
yes,
from the
I
other
was gonna
side.
say pre-medieval kind of story, like yeah, exactly, like the Odyssey, like the Argonauts, that sort of thing. But it's a Japanese version of that, obviously, and it's fun. It's like a fun story throughout the whole thing. I mean, it doesn't conform with normal modern storytelling things. It's like a Beowulf kind of adventure. People are slaying serpents, doing impossible things. Nothing really bad happens in the story. Like her adopted bamboo
Chinese
cutter.
merchant Kanza man.
Yeah, whatever. But like, what's
I do
new?
feel like there was a little bit of like a haha, we're Japanese, haha. thrown
And
in there.
he's sitting on the corner with a trench coat, and he opens it up, and he's like, "You
Yes.
want some fire rat skins? I got some fire rat skins."
Yeah, I mean that's some modernity kind of intruding on the era, because at the time there wasn't such a national distinction between Japan and China.
Well, if anything, it's actually was inverted. They revered the Chinese.
Yeah, no,
for being so eloquent.
As a Japanese nobleman, you probably would have gone to China to learn your characters,
Yeah.
and you would have lived there for several years before
It had
coming
like
back.
the same context that we had like Parisian affairs.
Yeah, exactly,
back in the day,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
If you were an English noble, you would have been sent to Paris to learn your grammar and whatnot. Yeah, learn how to use the 14th fork.
I was under the impression this was after the kamikaze incident, where China tried to invade and typhoons destroyed them.
I think it may have been before, if I'm not mistaken.
When was the Mongolian invasion? Was that the 8th century? It could be.
Yeah, possibly.
Because I know that the Japanese viewed the Chinese negatively after the whole invasion thing.
Technically speaking, it wasn't the Chinese though.
Yeah, they call it the Mongolians, but
we-
I mean,
Well, it was Mongolian Chinese army at that point, but it really wasn't like. So it wasn't the Ming Chinese, right? Which is
right.
the people that
it was Chinese Texas.
well, no, it was okay.
That just killed me.
That's the weirdest way I've heard Manchuria ever described.
Oh no!
Let me know how I'm wrong.
Yes.
Okay. Well, they ride horses, I guess. You got that.
They shoot from horseback.
They
right
they
to
love their
bare
meat.
arms.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on. But my point is so the Japanese really interacted with the Cantonese and the Ming,
They have a great wall to their south.
and the people that invaded them would have been like the Manchurians, which are technically speaking was not the same country for many centuries at this time. So I'm not sure exactly how that worked. It probably was really complicated to know, but. Yeah, that I think is probably just like a modern interjection by the Japanese production team, really than something that probably existed at the time. Of course, a few centuries after this, the Chinese got really upset with the Japanese because the Japanese kept waging wars. Not on China, but just in China. Two Japanese armies would just show up and have a battle, sack a city, and then, kind of leave. Which is why Japan, was banned from trading with China for 200 years. But anyway, so the thing in this that's weird is like a fine and pleasant story. It's adventurous. There's like romantic plot lines that happen throughout this. But the initial parents, they don't meet like an awful end or anything. They don't get executed for doing this. I believe they get paid quite a sum of money when she's sort of taken away to the nobleman's estates, right? And then she's living in a relatively good environment. As a woman of the era, she's kind of being forced into some sort of courtship, but she kind of cleverly avoids people she doesn't want to court by sending them to find the mythical treasures, and whoever finds these things will be the one to marry her. And basically none of this comes to pass. Although eventually there is like a romantic plot line that starts to pay off, right? And clearly Kaguya and what's his name?
Tsurumoto, is it not?
Sutamaru, I think.
Yeah.
They have a genuine affection for each other, and that's the kind of part which most people in Japan will kind of remember it for, is the moon part. So she is a princess sent down from the moon. I don't know why moon babies need to incubate in bamboo and be raised by human parents. It's never frankly addressed. But that's a thing. So she's the daughter of the Emperor of the Moon. It's almost like a science fiction plot. Japan has been doing those for hundreds of years, apparently. And when she returns to her imperial palace on the moon, she won't have any memories of her life on Earth, because the raiment that she wears completely dissolves her memories of the mortal world. And so there's a kind of heartbreaking depiction of this in the story, that as she's basically being forcefully taken back to her, I suppose, birth parents, she is, crying and in distress. But the moment that piece of clothing touches her, she just has absolutely no emotion left at all. And the people on Earth are kind of left, with their memories of her and her mortal origins. But she will never even think of them at all. And that's where the story ends.
And it's kind of suggested that everything is returning to the way it should have been, and the people below shouldn't have. Every time someone below her tried for her, it feels like the movie is suggesting they shouldn't try.
I don't know. I can see where you're coming from. For me, it had more. The stronger message that came through was of the sort of cyclical nature of birth, life, and death, right?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it is a reincarnation kind of allegory more than anything here.
Yeah,
but
the songs, the music, they all sort of allude to it. The whole nature thing. You constantly see death, but as a natural state throughout things. She'll pick up a dead insect and look at it whilst talking, and then throw it away, and they'll kill a pheasant, but it's not an overly big deal, other than the fact that they get dinner that evening.
Yeah. I mean, I think
Not in this case.
I think kind of unique to Japan that most cultures don't really have, except maybe like sort of Indian cultures as well, sort of have this kind of relation to the reincarnation cycle. Is just learning to let go of things and accepting your fate to achieve a sort of state of peace. Of course, Buddhism is basically that, right?
I was
Zen,
gonna say Buddhism.
specifically Zen Buddhism is really hardcore into that, just letting go of all earthly attachments to achieve
it,
some
yeah.
sort of peace in life.
Yeah.
And that is the most Japanese version of Buddhism. In fact, we spoke a bit about that in a previous episode. And that is the theme here. I think if you're going to look at it from like, a meta allegory kind of point of view, is that this is just a metaphor for that idea of reincarnation. So she's lived a good life, and her last moments were kind of thinking about a better life. So her next life is going to be like this perfect idyllic kind of moon life, which is, I think, a metaphor for leaving the wheel of reincarnation and moving to like a higher status of existence. Which, for the life of me, I can't remember what it's actually called in Buddhism, like Shakyamuni or something like that. And but on like a more personal kind of level, I think themes of like sakura leaves and stuff throughout Japanese culture, focusing on a fleeting moment in life, and simply appreciating it while it exists, are themes throughout this as well. So she was very enthusiastic about her life, and that continued until basically the moment of her quote-unquote death, her ascension. And it's only people who haven't kind of accepted her fate that are kind of caught up in the emotions of that death, or that transition to a different state of life. Yeah, I don't know. Is that like an appropriate kind of interpretation?
Certainly a valid interpretation, I think.
Well, what did you guys think then? If there was any sort of messaging behind that?
Dylan will be back with us in a moment.
Oh,
And
okay.
sadly, I must admit, maybe it's purely a frustration thing, but when it was revealed at the end that actually she's like a divine being,
Yeah.
for me, the story was about a person from below who was being courted by all of these greater powers and had to dance around obeying them.
Yes.
And then at the end, when it turned out that she was actually above them all this whole time, it turned from a story of someone of lower birth trying to live their own life into I was always above you. You had no right to command me. That's the only reason I was able to stay out of it.
I mean, there's
Obviously,
there's always that. Yeah.
That interpretation is based on me being offended about that particular thing.
I don't think it's interpretation. I think you're right. I think it's, to me, it's one of the less sort of
It's a lesser
interesting
theme.
or important parts of the story.
Well, I think it is important, or rather, I think it is important from a Japanese perspective. In the West, we don't view like power dynamics in that way too often. But there's so I don't know. For me, it felt like power dynamics was the most important part about most of this story, because it felt like she was trying to just live her life, but she couldn't say no. She flat could not say no to these guys because she didn't have the status. So she altered her life into um, figuring out how to stay free while not saying no to them. And then for the end of the story to be, actually, it turns out I was higher than all of you this whole time, anyways. Normal people can't say no to you. Was just like a, really?
I feel like those concepts can work together, right? It's like sort of talking to the perils of attachment, right?
Yeah.
When you attach that sort of aspect of the cycle of life and death, you'll always have roles that you have to fulfill that you don't want to fulfill. Now, yes, this takes it to an extreme for us in modern day context. I think probably back then it was possibly not as an extreme depiction.
But I mean, it never existed as was depicted, probably.
Yeah,
But this was probably an ideal.
Yeah, but yeah. So the fact is at the end, and I know this feels like the heartless aspect of it. Letting go, which her ascending kind of represents, means that that's not. She's not unhappy, which she would have been within that attachment system.
Right.
So I think those two ideas, yes, the power dynamics you're talking about are utilized, and that's along with that concept.
So I said I thought it was a less important aspect of it, but so what I meant by that, Yesh, is that I think the kind of the letting go and the forgetting and the kind of death analogies at the end are the kind of important parts of it. And you're right, they do emphasize humble beginnings, rise to power, people.
Well, yeah, exactly.
People interacting between, and as she gets higher and higher on that, it's supposed to sort of kind of give her a greater difficulty of letting go, and I think it's almost like a weird kind of moral of not accruing too much emotional baggage on your journey through life. Because it's sort of just going to weigh you down. And I think that's what it was getting at, and it's also just commenting on how kind of unimportant those important people are, because they're all just bound by the same rules as everyone else. And until you literally leave the wheels of the world, as Tolkien might have said, right? You need to literally go to a different planet with a different state of existence for those concepts to actually have any weight. Because in kind of a Buddhist point of view, I mean, people don't really carry their memories through with them from life to life. So, that's everything said and everything done in her entire life is just a feeling, kind of, that she retains, like somewhere in her being. And we sort of get that one kind of moment where she kind of cries, perhaps remembering a little bit of her existence on Earth. But it's all just like a sort of a passing flight in time, and maybe ultimately not as important as it feels in the moment. And I kind of think that's why it's important to like a Japanese perspective of art. A lot of Japanese art is about just that kind of completely contradictory to the message of this, right? It's about kind of holding on to a single moment in time forever. If you know where like banzai, like that scream into battle, is like a battle cry of trying to make one moment last 10,000 years. So banzai, 10,000 years. And capturing like the moments of like cherry blossoms like falling off trees and all those famous like water paintings and screenings and things like that in Japanese culture are just emblematic of like insisting that there is importance in a single moment that is more valuable than something that is continuous, I guess. And you get to see this kind of develop from this story, and it's just always also the moon is very important in the story, right? The idea of the moon and love throughout the rest of Japanese kind of culture will continue to have this sort of meaning. I'm sure other people who watch anime are aware that whenever someone says the moon is beautiful, it's just a coded way of someone saying that they love another person. So if you ever go on a date with a Japanese girl and you're watching the moon and she says something about that, it's more meaningful than you might think it would be. And yeah, and this is hugely influential on culture today. What's one of the one of the most popular animes of the last sort of 5 years is Kaguya-sama, Love is War. And broadly speaking, in the most indirect way, that is kind of a satire of the story, right? Set in very different settings. It's kind of like the roles have been reversed, so to speak. We have the prince character kind of being the pauper, and Princess Kaguya being like the princess emperor from the beginning, and being kind of like seen as an unobtainable goal for the protagonist, maybe in some respects. Although obviously that's not really how the series feels. But yeah, I think a very important part of Japanese culture just to go through. Now, did you guys enjoy it?
I did.
No.
No. Why did you enjoy it, Dylan?
Well, I mean, a lot of the reasons we've already mentioned. I really appreciated the art style.
Yeah.
And, I don't have necessarily the same sort of emotional triggers for the negative aspects, so I can let them go a little bit easier. And I just enjoyed it. It was whimsical. The Ghibli version was whimsical, but it's the only criticism I could give it really is that it might be a bit long, but it's not long compared to other
Ghibli films.
Films or anime movies that they tend to run in like over 2 hours.
137 minutes, a fairly standard movie length. Maybe a little bit long. Yesh, why didn't you like it?
Okay, perhaps it's due to the fact that I'm a little too accustomed to modern storytelling, maybe?
Sure.
It felt like I couldn't split this up into an Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 structure.
Oh, for sure.
It felt like a lot of it was building action. As the number of people courting her increased, it felt like we were presented with the problem. These people are getting in the way of her enjoying her life. I thought the central conceit was her outwitting everyone, getting a happy life, living a good life. And then the end was, lol JK. And then she left. It's as bad as it was all a dream, in my opinion. Because, once again, I wanted to point out for anyone listening, I am wrong here. I will admit that. I was focused on the wrong detail. I thought the central conceit of the movie, because it felt like the problem at the center of the movie was her trying to live a happy life. So for me, I was trying to follow the story of that and trying to get a payoff on that, which is a more modern story way of telling. Present a problem, show how it's resolved, show character growth or whatever. And the character growth in this was, hi, we're going to erase your personality, and out we're gone. Cheers, fuckers.
Bye, plebs, we're out.
That felt exactly like they went, here's this problem. Oh, I don't need to solve it. The show's over. We ran out of time. Goodbye.
And enjoy the famine and pestilence that you guys get on Earth. We're gonna drink in your honor. Bye.
Going to the moon party.
So
it's like, for me, it definitely felt like it built a good world. It built a good problem, and then it kind of abandoned that and left. But on the other side of the coin, from a Japanese perspective, I can understand that ascension is supposed to be a happy thing or a good thing, and that the story was actually about forming attachments and how that creates problems, and letting go is kind of an answer. But that wasn't the problem I was expecting. I was following or expecting an answer to. And I recognize that I am wrong. I am focusing too much on one thing.
I mean,
when this movie has
I don't know if you're wrong per se, but the reason it doesn't feel like a 3-act story structure is traditional Japanese stories don't have that. They've got something called the Kisho Tengo, which is a 4-act structure, which introduces something, presents a means or process of hardships that are accepted. It turns on a point, and then there's a abrupt result. And that is why anime doesn't end well, right? Because it's not the abrupt result is simply the end of the story, and to sort of mirror actual life. Everything in this is originally a sort of a Chinese concept, but very much in Japanese as well, is kind of about the getting to know the characters throughout the story. That is meant to be the entertaining and captivating part of it. And I think that doesn't sit very well with Western people, who expect at least a fourth of the story to be about the resolution. As all movies, most TV shows and such things basically have that as part of the structure. So while our kind of middle phase is the action and the meat of the story, we spend the first quarter of it getting to know characters, and then people do a lot of things, and then there's a long drawn out conclusion, which is where the climax of the story would happen.
Also, can I just say, if we're supposed to like the characters, the only likable characters were at the beginning, the little kids. The 3 jackasses were jackasses.
Yeah.
The
I don't
Emperor,
know if they're likable.
I mean,
threw his hair on a piece of wood or something.
Yeah.
And then Tsukihime, the character we were following, ends the movie with a busy signal going doo doo doo. Tsukihime not found.
I mean, I understand that. I don't really blame Ghibli for it. This is just
No, it's the story.
It's a story as it existed.
And they adapted it brilliantly, honestly.
But yeah, so I mean, it has a different story structure, and I don't like it either. I kind of want to, but it's more just one of those things that if you want to have any sort of pretension at knowing something about culture, it's like reading medieval literature. None of it's good, but so much stuff is based on it. Like the story of Arthur it's not a great story. It's kind of boring, and it also has these abrupt ends. Like Beowulf is mostly just about some guy singing the praises of a long dead king, and then he gets eaten by a dragon. Right? But it's art, and it's before an era of consumption, so everything in that time wasn't aimed at a mass audience, so it wasn't aimed to please necessarily. And in some ways, a lot of literature in the past was made to be endured by someone. So you would kind of be tested by it, and there would be a lesson, and you would have things to think about, and then things to talk about afterwards. So presumably you and your other nobles or aristocrats or higher class merchant families could entertain themselves in the long dark nights of the 9th century medieval period. And I think from that perspective, it's incredibly successful because people are still talking about it today. But I don't think it really holds up that well in the modern sense of construction. Okay, just on some meta notes about this thing. It didn't do very well financially. It lost. It cost 5 billion yen. It made back almost 3, and it did okay in America, but not very well. So it made maybe 1 billion back in America, 2 billion in Japan, and it kind of feels like almost a passion project for Ghibli, more than anything else, as just like a kind of loving restoration of an old story to kind of keep it in the modern audience's mind, I guess.
Mm.
But yeah, I think that's all we have to say. Any other comments, guys?
Not really.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone for listening. I do suggest. I mean, I don't like the movie, so it's hard to say, like, for sure watch this. Maybe check out the Cliff Notes. If you're interested in Japanese culture, it's very important, as I've said multiple times. All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. Ciao for now.
Bye.
Yes.